In the shadow of danger, Sarah's world shattered as kidnappers seized her family, leaving them with only fear and uncertainty. Little did they know, a relentless pursuit of justice was about to turn their nightmare into a fight for survival. As Sarah's heart raced, she clung to the hope that her love for her daughter could overcome the terror surrounding them. The captors, oblivious of the family's strength, had no idea what was coming for them. With every breath, the stakes grew higher. One wrong move could cost them everything, but in the depths of their darkest hour, a hero emerged, determined to rewrite their fate. The added suspense and intensity might increase the emotional depth and keep the viewers more hooked. What do you think? Before we journey further into this unforgettable story, make sure you're subscribed to Epic Story Moments. Hit that bell icon now so you never miss an incredible tale. Join our community by liking, sharing, and commenting to keep these heartwarming stories coming. And hey, tell us where you're watching from. We love connecting with you all. The late afternoon sun stretched its golden fingers across the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood Heights, painting a tranquil picture of a neighborhood untouched by chaos. Officer Ryan Carter, a seasoned patrolman with a sharp mind and a compassionate heart, was finishing his shift, his patrol car humming softly as it navigated the tree-lined avenues. Just as he began to ease into the routine serenity of the day, a sudden blur darted into the street ahead of him. A boy, no older than 10, stumbled into view, his small frame trembling, his shirt smeared with dark, crimson streaks. His face, etched with terror, shattered any illusion of calm. Ryan slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding as he leaped out of the car. "Hey there, kid. Are you hurt?" Ryan's voice was steady, though his instincts were already on high alert. The boy gasped for air, his chest heaving. Tears streaked his dirt-smudged cheeks as he struggled to form words. "Officer, please, you have to help me." His voice cracked with desperation, and his wide eyes flickered nervously toward a row of houses. Ryan crouched down, gripping the boy's trembling shoulders with a gentle but firm hand. "Slow down, son. Tell me what happened." The boy's words tumbled out in a frantic rush. They took Mommy. We were playing outside, and men with masks came. They hurt Daddy. He's not moving." His voice faltered, breaking into sobs as he added, "They said they'd come back for me." Ryan's gut tightened. This wasn't just a neighborhood scuffle or a case of a lost child. This was something far darker. "What's your name, kid?" Ryan asked, keeping his voice calm despite the storm of urgency building inside him. Jake Harper," the boy stammered, his gaze darting over his shoulder as if expecting shadows to come alive. "All right, Jake, listen to me," Ryan said, his voice steady but commanding. "Are you hurt?" Jake shook his head quickly, the motion frantic. "No, Daddy told me to hide, but when I came out, he wasn't moving. There was blood everywhere." He whispered the last part, as if speaking it too loudly would make it worse. Ryan's pulse quickened. He opened the passenger door of his car and gestured for Jake to get in. "We're going to your house. You're safe with me." As Ryan drove toward the Harper residence, Jake clung to the seatbelt as though it were a lifeline. His small hands gripped tightly, his knuckles white, his breathing uneven. "Jake, I need you to tell me everything you remember," Ryan said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "There were 3 of them," Jake began, his voice trembling. One had a really deep voice. He kept yelling at Mom to get in the van. Dad tried to fight them, but they hit him. "Did you see their vehicle?" Ryan pressed gently, glancing at the boy. Jake nodded quickly. "A black van, big, with dark windows." "You're brave, Jake. Running for help like this was the right thing to do," Ryan reassured him, though his mind was racing. As they pulled into the Harper driveway, Ryan's chest tightened at the eerie stillness surrounding the modest home. The front door stood ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze. "Stay here, Jake," Ryan instructed firmly. "I'll check inside. Keep your eyes on me, okay?" Jake nodded hesitantly, his small frame curling up in the passenger seat as though trying to disappear. Ryan approached the house, his hand hovering near his holstered weapon. Inside, the scene was chaotic. The living room was a wreck, overturned furniture, a shattered lamp, and blood smears leading toward the staircase. "Peter Harper," Ryan called out, his voice steady despite the dread clawing at him. "This is Officer Ryan Carter. If you can hear me, call out." A faint groan broke the silence. Ryan followed the sound to the base of the stairs, where Peter Harper lay sprawled, his shirt soaked with blood from a gash on his head. Kneeling beside him, Ryan quickly checked for a pulse. Relief washed over him when he found one, though it was faint and thready. Grabbing his radio, Ryan called for backup. "Dispatch, this is Officer Carter. I have an unconscious adult male with head trauma at 148 Maplewood Drive, requesting immediate medical assistance and additional units." As he waited for backup, Ryan's sharp eyes scanned the living room. A crumpled piece of paper caught his attention beneath the coffee table. Unfolding it, his stomach churned at the hastily scrawled message. $500,000. No cops. 48 hours, or you'll never see them again. The simplicity of the note was chilling. Its implications even more so. Stepping outside, Ryan knelt beside Jake, his voice softer now. "Jake, your dad's alive. Paramedics are coming to help him. You've been so brave, buddy. We're going to figure this out." Sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder as patrol cars and an ambulance arrived. Ryan briefed the other officers, while paramedics attended to Peter. One of the younger officers, Martinez, glanced at the note and whistled low. "A ransom? This isn't random, is it?" "No," Ryan said grimly. "Start canvassing the neighbors. We need eyes, ears, and anything they saw or heard." As the chaos unfolded, Ryan couldn't shake the image of Jake's terrified face. A family was torn apart, and the clock was ticking. Ryan vowed silently that he wouldn't rest until the Harpers were reunited and justice was served. The crime scene was a chaotic swirl of flashing red and blue lights. Officers cordoned off the area as detectives moved methodically through the Harper residence, their faces set in grim determination. The forensic team began documenting every detail of the grisly scene, their tools clicking and snapping in the tense silence. A faint, muddy footprint on the hardwood floor near the front door caught the attention of one of the technicians. "This could belong to one of the suspects," she murmured, snapping a photo before dusting for fingerprints. Nearby, another technician inspected the blood smears leading up the staircase, her expression grave. "It looks like the victim was dragged here after being injured," she observed. "There are signs of a struggle. This wasn't quick or clean." Detective Ryan Carter took in the details, piecing together the sequence of events in his mind. Peter Harper must have fought back, he thought, but he was outnumbered, overpowered. Despite the suspects' efforts to cover their tracks, Ryan's trained eyes saw faint clues they'd missed. No trace of their identities, no obvious mistakes, at least not yet. In the living room, paramedics worked to stabilize Peter Harper, who groaned softly as they cleaned the blood from his head wound. His eyelids fluttered open, and he stared blankly at the ceiling, his gaze distant and unfocused. "Mr. Harper," Ryan said, crouching beside him, his voice calm but insistent. "Can you hear me?" Peter's eyes struggled to focus on the detective. Pain twisted his features as he rasped, "The kids. Sarah. Emily." Ryan's heart tightened at the fear in Peter's voice. "Jake's safe," he reassured him, gently but firmly. "We're going to find Sarah and Emily, but I need you to help me. Do you remember what happened?" Peter winced as the paramedics applied pressure to his wound. "3 of them," he croaked. "Masks. One was big, deep voice. They knocked me out before I could do anything. Did you hear them say anything? A name? A place?" Ryan pressed. Peter closed his eyes, struggling to summon the memory. "A warehouse." His voice faltered. "They said something about a warehouse." Ryan filed away the detail. his mind racing. "Hang in there," he said. "The medics are taking you to the hospital. We'll take it from here." As the paramedics loaded Peter into the ambulance, Ryan stood in the driveway, staring at the crumpled ransom note in his hand. Each jagged letter screamed urgency. $500,000. No cops. 48 hours. Or you'll never see them again. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. 2 lives hung in the balance, and the clock was already ticking. Back inside, Ryan found Jake Harper sitting on the couch, a blanket draped around his trembling shoulders. The boy's swollen eye glistened with unshed tears. Ryan crouched to meet his gaze, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "Jake," he said gently, "I promise you, we're going to do everything we can to bring your mom and sister home." Jake looked up, his voice shaking. "Do you really think we'll find them in time?" Ryan met his eyes, his voice steady. "I do, but I need you to stay strong. You're braver than you know, Jake. You've already helped us so much." The boy nodded, determination flickering through his fear. At the station, the atmosphere buzzed with focused intensity. Officers and forensic specialists moved with purpose, piecing together every shred of evidence. Ryan sat at his desk, the ransom note spread before him. Its words were a stark reminder of the stakes. Lives, hope, and time slipping away. He turned his attention to Jake, who sat nearby. "Jake," he said softly, pulling a chair closer. "I know you've told me a lot already, but I need you to think hard. Did you hear the men say anything else?" Jake hesitated, then said, "One of them. He said something about making up for lost time, like they were running late. And another guy, he was mad. He kept saying this wasn't supposed to take so long." Ryan nodded, the pieces beginning to fit together. "That's good, Jake. That tells us they were under pressure. That could be their weakness." Not long after, a breakthrough came. Surveillance footage from a nearby traffic camera captured a black van speeding away from the Harper residence. Additional footage showed the van heading toward the industrial district, a sprawling maze of warehouses, some abandoned and others still in use. Simultaneously, a gas station attendant called in a tip. A man matching one suspect's description had stopped shortly before the abduction. Surveillance footage confirmed the sighting. The man bought cigarettes and prepaid burner phones. "They're trying to cover their tracks," Ryan muttered, "but the gas station gives us a timeline. It's a start." With the evidence mounting, Ryan coordinated with state authorities to assemble a task force. Before heading out, he found Peter Harper sitting in a holding area, his head in his hands. "Peter," Ryan said, his voice firm but empathetic, "we're starting to get a clearer picture of who might be behind this. Is there anyone who would have a reason to come after you or your family?" Peter hesitated, then sighed heavily. "I didn't want to believe it could be connected. But Trevor Blake, he used to be my business partner. We ran a contracting firm together until I found out he was embezzling." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "What happened? I reported him," Peter admitted. "He lost everything. He swore he'd make me pay, but that was years ago. I thought he'd moved on." Ryan straightened, his mind clicking into overdrive. The stakes had risen, but so had their resolve. With every clue, every step closer to the truth, the race to save Sarah and Emily intensified. Time was their enemy, but justice was on their side. Peter Harper's mind raced as he recalled the last conversation he had with Trevor Blake. The memory was sharp, every word a barb. Trevor had stolen money, trying to pass it off as a mistake, but Peter had seen through the ruse. When Peter threatened to go to the authorities, Trevor disappeared before charges could be filed. Now, seated across from Detective Ryan, Peter's voice wavered as he said, "If Trevor thinks he can use this situation for revenge or money, he's capable of anything." Ryan's pen paused mid-note, his sharp gaze locked on Peter. "Do you think he'd go this far? Kidnapping your family?" Peter's face darkened, the weight of his guilt evident in his furrowed brows. "Trevor always cared more about money than anything else. If he thinks he can extort me, I wouldn't put it past him. The air was thick with tension as the team worked to verify Trevor's connection to the case. The clock on the ransom demand was ticking down, every second a cruel reminder of the stakes. Peter's phone buzzed, the sound cutting through the oppressive silence. A message from the kidnappers flashed on the screen. No delays, no excuses. $500,000 or they die. Ryan leaned over, studying the message. His trained eyes caught the area code of the burner phone. It matched the location of a gas station tip they had received earlier. "We're closing in," he muttered, rising with resolve. Turning to his team, he commanded, "We have a name, a location to search, and a motive. Let's move." Meanwhile, in a dimly lit basement, Sarah Harper sat on the cold, damp floor. Her wrists were bound tightly behind her back with rough ropes that cut into her skin. Beside her, her young daughter Emily clung to her side, trembling. The single overhead bulb flickered, casting jagged shadows on the cracked walls. The stale air reeked of mildew and fear. Across the room, 3 masked men loomed like specters. The leader, Victor, was tall and broad-shouldered, his icy blue eyes scanning the room with calculated menace. His voice cut through the tense silence. "Stick to the plan," he snapped at the wiry man with a limp. "We get the money, and then we decide what to do with them." The limping man hesitated, his nervous energy palpable. "What if Peter can't pay? We're sitting ducks the longer we wait. The cops could already be closing in." Victor's fist slammed onto the metal table, the sound reverberating off the concrete walls. "He'll pay. Men like him always do." The third man, stocky with a perpetual scowl, crossed his arms and muttered darkly, "Doesn't matter. We're not leaving witnesses." Emily flinched at his words, her small hands clutching her mother's sleeve. Sarah forced herself to remain composed, though her heart pounded wildly. Her sharp mind analyzed every detail. The men's hierarchy, their anxieties, their vulnerabilities. "They're scared," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Despite her terror, her young eyes shone with a startling clarity. "They don't know what they're doing." Sarah nodded subtly, a mix of pride and dread filling her. "Stay calm," she murmured, shielding her daughter with her body. Her resolve hardened. She needed to protect Emily at all costs. Victor's piercing gaze snapped to them. "What are you whispering about?" he demanded, stepping closer. Sarah met his stare, her voice steady despite the quake in her chest. "I was just telling her to stay calm. She's a kid. You've already done enough." Victor sneered but said nothing, retreating to the table. Hours dragged on, the suffocating tension thickening with every passing moment. Sarah noticed the limping man pacing near the stairs, his unease growing. She saw an opening. "Hey!" she called softly. Her tone was calm, almost soothing. The man froze, glancing at her warily. "What do you want?" he barked, his defensive posture betraying his fear. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said, her voice laced with quiet desperation. "I can see it in your eyes. You're not like them. Let us go. No one has to know." His lips twitched, as though he wanted to respond, but fear silenced him. Victor's harsh voice interrupted, pulling the man's attention back. "We're moving to the second location after the drop. No point staying here any longer." The stocky man frowned. "What if the cops find us before then?" Victor's tone was icy. "They won't, unless one of you screws up." Emily clung tighter to Sarah. "Mom, what's going to happen to us?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, forcing a calmness she didn't feel. "We're going to be okay, sweetheart. Just stay quiet and listen to me." Back at the Harper household, the atmosphere was suffocating. Peter sat at the dining table, his head in his hands, while his teenage son Jake watched him with wide, tear-filled eyes. The room buzzed with police activity, radios crackling with updates. Peter's phone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the chaos. Ryan gestured for Peter to answer, his steady presence a lifeline. With trembling hands, Peter picked up. "Hello." His voice cracked. Victor's cold voice came through. "Here's how this works. Bring $500,000 to the East Side Industrial Park by midnight. Come alone. If I even think there's a cop in sight, you'll never see your wife and daughter again." "Got it." Peter's voice broke. "Wait, I need more time." "No more talking," Victor interrupted sharply. "You have your instructions. Do not screw this up." The line went dead. Peter slumped forward, gripping his hair as despair washed over him. Ryan stepped closer, his voice firm yet compassionate. "We'll monitor the drop and make sure your family is safe. But you need to stay strong, Peter. This isn't the time to lose it." Peter nodded weakly, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "Just bring them back to me." Peter's resolve wavered as the situation spiraled out of control. The new message hit him like a hammer. $750,000 demanded by noon tomorrow, no excuses. His fist slammed onto the table in frustration, sending a coffee mug tumbling to the floor, shattering on impact. "This is impossible," he bellowed, his voice shaking under the weight of despair. "I don't have that kind of money. How am I supposed to save them if I can't meet their demands?" Across the room, his young son, Jake, flinched at the outburst, tears glistening in his wide eyes. "Are Mommy and Emily coming back?" he asked in a trembling voice. Peter's anger crumbled into guilt as he pulled Jake into a fierce embrace. "I'm sorry, buddy," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm just so scared." Ryan, standing nearby, intervened, his voice steady and reassuring. "Peter, I know this feels overwhelming, but you're not in this alone. We're closing in on them. They're making mistakes because they're desperate." Peter looked up, his bloodshot eyes filled with despair. "What if it's not enough? What if they—" His voice faltered. The thought was too horrific to complete. Ryan's tone was resolute. "It will be enough. But we need you to stay strong. For Jake, for Sarah, and for Emily." The team analyzed the kidnapper's latest message, uncovering a critical lead. The burner phone used to send the message had been traced to an industrial park on the east side of the city, the same area where the black van had been sighted earlier. Ryan pointed to a map spread across the table. "They're staying mobile, but it looks like they're using this warehouse district as a base. That gives us an edge." Martinez, one of Ryan's trusted colleagues, leaned in. "If we know where they're holding the hostages, why not raid the place now?" "Because we can't risk tipping them off," Ryan replied firmly. "If they suspect anything, they could move Sarah and Emily again or worse." As the tactical team prepared for a covert operation, Peter scrambled to gather the ransom money. He called in every favor, liquidated assets, and tried desperately to scrape together the impossible sum. Despite his efforts, the total fell far short of the demand. "I don't know what else to do," Peter admitted, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "Even if I sell everything, I won't have $750,000 by tomorrow." Jake, seated quietly on the couch, looked up with a glimmer of hope. "What about Uncle Greg? He has a lot of money, right?" Peter hesitated. His brother Greg was wealthy, but notoriously tight-fisted. Still, with no other options, he picked up the phone. The call was tense and brief, Greg reluctantly agreeing to wire a portion of the money. "This better not be a scam," Greg grumbled before ending the call. Though grateful for the partial funds, Peter knew it wouldn't be enough. Meanwhile, Ryan received another critical update. Surveillance had confirmed movement near the industrial park. The black van was parked behind one of the warehouses. "This lines up with our intel," Ryan told the team. "We're closing in, but we need to be careful. If they sense anything, it could escalate." The SWAT team moved under the cover of darkness, their convoy gliding silently through the city. At the industrial park, the eerie stillness of the decaying buildings set an ominous tone. Ryan's voice crackled softly through the comms. "Perimeter secure. Move in quietly." The officers advanced with precision, their steps muffled against the gravel. Ryan led the charge, his flashlight slicing through the shadows as they approached the warehouse. The steel door creaked open, revealing a cavernous space dimly lit by moonlight filtering through broken windows. The smell of oil and rust mingled with the acrid stench of stale cigarette smoke. Discarded items littered the floor: cigarette butts, fast food wrappers, and a coil of frayed rope. Ryan's sharp gaze took in every detail. "They were here recently," he muttered. The team spread out, methodically searching every corner. No sign of the hostages, an officer reported. Ryan clenched his jaw, his flashlight catching a set of haphazard footprints leading to a rear exit. "They anticipated this," Martinez said grimly. "They knew we'd come." Ryan's voice was tight with determination. "They didn't just leave. They fled in a hurry. Check everything. If they made a mistake, we'll find it." Minutes later, a forensic technician knelt by faint tire tracks near the exit, shining a light on the evidence. Ryan's mind raced as he connected the dots. Time was running out, but the trail wasn't cold yet. They were closing in, and he was determined not to fail. The crunch of gravel beneath their boots was almost imperceptible as Ryan's tactical unit closed in on the decrepit boathouse. The moon cast a pale glow over the dock, illuminating the peeling paint and rust-streaked walls of the structure. Every breath was measured, every step deliberate. Ryan's heart thudded in sync with the tension in the air as he signaled for his team to halt just outside the boathouse entrance. Inside, faint voices seeped through the walls. Ryan motioned for silence, raising a hand to his ear as he focused on the muffled conversation. Through the cracks in the warped wooden walls, the soft flicker of an overhead bulb cast long, erratic shadows. Sarah and Emily sat bound to chairs in the corner, their forms slumped in exhaustion. Emily's face was tear-streaked, her small hands trembling as she tugged futilely at the ropes biting into her wrists. Across from her, Sarah wore an expression of determined calm, murmuring soft reassurances to her daughter, though her own eyes betrayed the deep fear that churned inside her. Victor, the ringleader, paced back and forth, his boots clapping against the concrete floor, his sharp features twisted in a mask of frustration, his voice laced with venom as he barked orders at his accomplices. "They're stalling," Victor growled, his glare darting between the other men. "We gave them the new deadline. If Peter wanted his family back, the money would already be here." The stocky accomplice leaned against a rickety table, his arms crossed and a skeptical look on his face. "You're the one who upped the price, Victor. Maybe you pushed too hard. What if you scared him off?" Victor spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. He closed the distance between them in 3 quick strides, his voice low and menacing. "Don't question me. I know exactly what I'm doing." The third man, limping slightly as he shifted his weight, hesitated before speaking. "Maybe we should take a partial payment," he ventured, his voice unsure. "Let the hostages go and cut our losses." Victor turned on him, rage boiling over. "You've got to be kidding me," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "We've come this far, and you want to fold? Are you stupid or just scared?" The man with the limp shrank under Victor's glare, but pressed on. "Look around, Victor," he said, his voice growing firmer despite his evident fear. "The longer we stay here, the more we risk. You think Peter doesn't have the cops crawling all over this by now?" Victor's jaw clenched, his fists tightening as he glared at the man. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the overhead bulb. Tension hung thick in the air, a volatile mix of fear, anger, and desperation. Outside, Ryan's team moved into position. The tactical unit had split into 2 groups, one securing the perimeter, the other preparing to breach the main entrance. Ryan's voice was calm but firm as he spoke into his radio. "Eyes on all exits. No one gets out without us knowing. Move on my mark." The faint hum of static crackled in his earpiece, followed by Martinez's voice. "Perimeter secure. We've got visuals on the black van parked to the side." Ryan took a deep breath, his hand tightening around the grip of his flashlight. The faint glow from inside the boathouse revealed the hostages' silhouettes, confirming their presence. He signaled to his team, his voice a low murmur. "They're in there. We go in quiet. Element of surprise is our advantage. Let's bring them home." Inside, Victor's pacing grew more agitated. He slammed his fist against the table, sending a stack of papers scattering to the floor. "Enough of this. We're not running again. We hold our ground and see this through." The stocky man and the limping accomplice exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear Victor's grip on control was slipping, and the cracks in their unity were widening. Ryan moved toward the door, his team fanning out behind him. The soft creak of the aging wood beneath their boots was nearly masked by the sound of the waves lapping against the dock. He raised his hand, counting down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The door burst open with a sharp crack, and the team poured in with precision. Flashlights cut through the dim light, illuminating the startled faces of the kidnappers. "Drop your weapons. Hands in the air." Ryan's voice rang out, commanding and unwavering. Victor reached for his gun, but a sharp shot from an officer disarmed him before he could act. The stocky man froze, his hands shooting up in surrender, while the limping accomplice fell to his knees, pleading incoherently. Ryan moved swiftly towards Sarah and Emily, his heart pounding as he saw the fear etched on their faces. "You're safe now," he said gently, cutting through the ropes with deft precision. Sarah pulled Emily into a tight embrace, her tears flowing freely as relief washed over her. As the team secured the scene, Victor snarled from where he was being handcuffed. "You think this is over? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Ryan locked eyes with him, his voice cold and firm. "Neither do you." Outside, Peter and Jake waited anxiously near the command center. When Ryan emerged, guiding Sarah and Emily toward them, Peter's knees buckled in relief. He pulled his family into a crushing embrace, his tears mingling with theirs as Jake clung tightly to his mother and sister. Ryan watched the reunion from a distance, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. The night had been long, the risks immense, but the mission was a success. As he turned to leave, Martinez clapped him on the shoulder. "Nice work, Carter." Ryan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's what we're here for." The moon cast a pale glow over Dock 17, where the dilapidated boathouse stood ominously at the edge of the water. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the flicker of a single dim bulb revealing the fear-stricken faces of Sarah and her young daughter, Emily. Both were tied to old, rusted chairs, their wrists raw and their spirits hanging by a thread. Across the room, Victor, the ringleader, paced angrily, his boots echoing ominously against the concrete floor. His sharp features were twisted in frustration, a dangerous energy radiating from him. "You think I don't see what's happening here?" Victor barked, glaring at his accomplices. His voice, low and venomous, cut through the silence. "The cops are circling, and you want to start questioning my plan now." One of his men, a gaunt figure with a pronounced limp, shifted uncomfortably. His eyes darted to Sarah and Emily, guilt flickering for a moment before he spoke hesitantly. "Victor, maybe we've pushed too far. The longer we keep them, the worse this gets." Victor spun to face him, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think we can just let them go? Do you have any idea what's at stake?" He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the scattered tools and papers. Sarah, observing the dynamic, took a deep breath. Her maternal instincts overpowered her fear as she addressed Victor directly. "Please listen to me," she began, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "This isn't the way out. Let us go, and I'll talk to Peter. We can find a way to resolve this without anyone else getting hurt." Victor laughed coldly, leaning closer to her. "You think I trust a word you say? No one crosses me and walks away clean. Not Peter. Not you." Meanwhile, outside the boathouse, Ryan Carter and his tactical team prepared for the breach. Ryan's sharp gaze never wavered as he observed the structure through the night vision scope. The grainy feed from the surveillance drone showed the captives clearly, their positions marked in his mind like a map. Perimeter secured. Martinez's voice crackled over the comms. "Awaiting your command." Ryan exhaled slowly, his mind racing through the contingencies. He spoke evenly, steadying his team. "On my count. 3, 2, 1. Move." The door exploded inward with a deafening crack, flashbangs igniting the room in blinding bursts of light and sound. Chaos erupted as Victor and his crew scrambled, disoriented by the sudden assault. Victor lunged for Sarah, pulling a knife from his belt and pressing it to her throat in a desperate bid for control. "Back off, or I'll do it," he roared, his voice raw and desperate. Ryan entered, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Victor, listen to me," he said, his tone firm but calm. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Let them go, and we'll talk. You don't want to make this worse." Victor's eyes darted around the room, wild and calculating. "You think I'm stupid? I know how this ends. You've got snipers outside, don't you?" As Ryan tried to de-escalate, Sarah saw an opportunity. The man with the limp had edged closer to her chair, his focus on Victor's tirade. Summoning her courage, she drove her elbow into his ribs with all her strength. The man stumbled, colliding with Victor and sending him off balance. "Now!" Ryan shouted. The tactical team moved with precision. One officer tackled Victor, wrenching the knife from his grip, while another subdued the man with the limp. The third accomplice attempted to flee, but was intercepted at the back exit by Martinez. "Clear," came the call as the last of the kidnappers was restrained. Ryan rushed to Sarah and Emily, quickly cutting their bonds. Emily threw her arms around her mother, sobbing uncontrollably. Sarah winced as she moved, a shallow cut on her neck the only evidence of Victor's final threat. Despite her pain, she whispered soothingly to her daughter, "It's over. We're safe." Ryan crouched beside them, his expression softening. "Paramedics are on their way. You're both going to be okay." As the SWAT team secured the scene, they uncovered a locked briefcase beneath a workbench. Inside were documents that revealed a much larger criminal network. Photographs, names, and financial records detailed a sprawling extortion and ransom operation spanning multiple states. "This is bigger than we thought," Martinez said, flipping through the files. "Victor's just a cog in a much larger machine." Ryan nodded grimly. "This isn't over, but we've got the leverage we need to take down the rest of them." Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder as paramedics and backup units arrived. Moments later, Peter's car screeched to a halt at the edge of the scene. He rushed towards Sarah and Emily, pulling them into a tight embrace, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered repeatedly. "I should have protected you." Sarah held him close, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "You did. We're here because of you." Ryan watched the reunion from a distance, a rare smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. For a brief moment, the weight of the case lifted, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. But as he turned back to the boathouse, the briefcase in hand, he knew the fight wasn't over. The documents were a roadmap to dismantling a far-reaching network, and there was no time to rest. For now, though, the light of justice had broken through the darkness. The black waves of the ocean shimmered under the moonlight, as Sarah sat in the dimly lit interview room with Emily nestled close. The faint hum of activity echoed from the adjacent offices, a stark reminder of the storm they had just weathered. Sarah's face bore the weariness of survival, but her eyes glimmered with a quiet determination as she gently stroked Emily's hair, offering comfort amidst the chaos that had upended their lives. Ryan Carter stepped into the room, his presence calm yet commanding. He pulled a chair across from them, his eyes scanning the mother and daughter. "You're both incredibly brave," he began, his voice steady but warm. "Anything you can share will help us make sure these men pay for what they've done." Sarah drew a deep breath, her voice unwavering despite the lingering fear. They kept us tied up in that boathouse for hours. Victor, he was in charge. He had this way of looking at us, like we were just pawns in his game. But the man with the limp, he was different. He seemed hesitant, almost scared. I think he wanted out, but didn't have the courage to act. Emily, clutching a stuffed animal handed to her by one of the officers earlier, spoke up. Her small voice, though trembling, carried a determined edge. They said Daddy couldn't stop them. Victor kept saying they'd hurt Mommy if the money didn't come fast enough. Ryan nodded, his jaw tightening as he absorbed their words. Your courage helps more than you know, he assured them. We'll make sure they never hurt anyone else. The night had grown quieter, but in another part of the city, chaos simmered just beneath the surface. Trevor Blake, a man who had once epitomized success and respect in the community, was now pacing the private airfield. His sleek black car glistened under the faint glow of runway lights as he approached the idling jet. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, his calm demeanor betrayed the turmoil within. Inside his ear, a call crackled. They're closing in, a voice warned. You have to leave now. Trevor stiffened, his face twitching ever so slightly. Just make sure the plane's ready. He snapped before disconnecting the call. Hidden in the shadows surrounding the airfield, Ryan Carter and his team waited in tense silence. Their eyes were fixed on Trevor, every movement scrutinized. The comms came alive with Ryan's quiet command. Hold your positions. Wait for my signal. As Trevor stepped out of the car and walked toward the jet, Ryan gave the signal. Move in. The team swarmed the tarmac with precision, their weapons raised. Trevor Blake, you're under arrest. Ryan's voice rang out with authority, cutting through the night. Trevor froze mid-step, his hands instinctively raising in surrender. For a moment, he retained his composure, his lips curling into a condescending smirk. This is a mistake, he declared. I've done nothing wrong. Ryan stepped forward, holding up a file containing the incriminating evidence. Save it for the courtroom, Blake. We've got all the proof we need. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Trevor's mask began to crack. You'll regret this, he hissed, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. You have no idea who you're dealing with. But Ryan remained unfazed. We know exactly who you are, and your reign of terror ends tonight. Back at the station, Victor sat in the harsh glare of the interrogation room, his defiance evident. He leaned back in the steel chair, arms crossed, his sneer unwavering. Detective Martinez flipped through the case file, his tone cold and matter-of-fact. Kidnapping, extortion, assault, conspiracy. Shall I go on? Victor's smirk deepened. Doesn't matter. You don't have enough to pin me beyond this job. Martinez raised an eyebrow. Oh, we've got plenty. The briefcase, the burner phones, your accomplices. And when the court sees the fear in that little girl's eyes and hears her mother testify, you'll wish you cooperated. Victor faltered, the confidence in his smirk dimming, but he kept his silence. In the adjoining room, the man with the limp sat hunched over, his fingers nervously drumming on the table. Unlike Victor, his fear was palpable. Ryan leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. We know you're not the mastermind, he began. You're scared, and you should be. But you have a chance to make this easier on yourself. Talk, and the DA might show leniency. The man hesitated, his gaze darting toward the one-way mirror. Victor's not going to protect me, he muttered, almost to himself. You're right, Ryan pressed. Victor's only looking out for himself. But you've got a chance to walk away with less time. So, start talking. The man exhaled deeply, his resolve crumbling. It's bigger than us, he admitted. This whole thing was set up by Trevor Blake. The revelation unraveled a larger conspiracy, as financial records seized from Victor's briefcase linked Trevor to a sprawling network of crime. It wasn't just about ransom, Ryan muttered grimly as he examined the evidence. This was revenge. Meanwhile, News of Trevor's arrest rippled through the community, shattering the image of the respected businessman. Outside his home, Peter Harper addressed reporters, his voice heavy with emotion but steady. "What happened to my family was horrific, but it exposed something much bigger. Trevor Blake used his power to destroy lives. I won't stop until he's held accountable." Inside, Sarah watched Peter's statement on the news, her resolve hardening. "We'll testify," she said quietly, looking at Emily. "We'll make sure no one else suffers because of him." The Harper family's courage and the team's relentless pursuit of justice marked the beginning of the end for Trevor's empire. As dawn broke over the city, Ryan stood by the station's window, watching the first rays of light pierce through the darkness. Victory had come, but the battle for justice was far from over. The relentless pursuit of justice brought every piece of the intricate puzzle together. With Trevor Blake in custody and Victor's gang dismantled, the police poured their efforts into building an unassailable case. Mountains of evidence, from financial records to Victor's briefcase, and testimonies from Sarah, Emily, and even the man with the limp, were meticulously assembled. Ryan Carter, standing in the precinct's conference room, addressed his team with quiet determination. "We've taken them off the streets," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "Now, we ensure they stay there. This case needs to be airtight." Martinez nodded firmly. "The DA is confident. With everything we've got, neither Blake nor Victor will slip through the cracks." For a fleeting moment, Ryan allowed himself a rare sense of satisfaction. They had unraveled a massive criminal network, a web of greed and corruption, and ensured that justice was within reach. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial commenced. Spectators, journalists, and members of the community filled the gallery, their eyes fixed on the central figures of the proceedings. At the heart of it all sat the Harper family. Peter, Sarah, Emily, and little Jake, each of them embodying quiet resilience in the face of overwhelming trauma. Peter's hand gripped Sarah's tightly, his expression a blend of determination and lingering pain. Beside him, Jake clung to his mother, his wide eyes darting around the intimidating room. Though he wasn't required to testify, Jake had insisted on attending every day, refusing to let fear keep him away. His one swollen eye had healed, but the emotional scars remained, evident in the way he leaned against Sarah for comfort. When Sarah took the stand, dressed simply but with an air of quiet strength, the courtroom fell silent. Her voice trembled as she recounted the harrowing ordeal. Victor's threats, the cold confines of the boathouse, and her desperate attempts to shield Emily from harm. "I didn't know if we'd make it out alive," she admitted, tears glistening in her eyes, "but I knew I had to stay strong for my daughter." Emily's testimony followed, and the weight of her words filled the room. Despite her trembling hands, her bravery shone through as she described the chilling moments of captivity. Her voice broke as she recounted the knife Victor had used to intimidate her mother. I thought he was going to hurt her," she whispered, her tears mirroring the heartbreak of the gallery. "I just wanted us to go home." Ryan Carter's turn on the stand brought a shift in the courtroom's atmosphere. His account of the investigation and rescue was delivered with precision, each word a nail in Trevor Blake's coffin. When the defense tried to discredit him, Ryan remained unshaken. "Every lead we followed was supported by evidence," he said firmly, meeting the attorney's gaze. "Financial records, testimonies, and surveillance footage leave no doubt about Mr. Blake's role." The prosecution presented an unrelenting case. Evidence tied Trevor Blake directly to the gang, while Victor's accomplice provided damning testimony about Blake's instructions to target Peter Harper. Surveillance footage and financial records cemented his connection to the operation. This wasn't a crime of passion, the prosecutor declared in her closing argument. It was calculated, cold-blooded extortion fueled by greed and vengeance. Trevor Blake used his wealth and influence to destroy lives, but today, justice will prevail. The jury deliberated for mere hours before returning their verdict. Trevor Blake was found guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping, extortion, and racketeering. His once pristine reputation lay in ruins, replaced by the reality of a 20-year prison sentence. Victor and his accomplices received equally harsh sentences, ensuring they could no longer harm anyone. In the gallery, Peter exhaled deeply, tears streaming down his face as he embraced his family. Sarah wrapped an arm around Emily, and Jake looked up at Ryan with a small, grateful smile. The Harper family relocated to a quiet neighborhood, leaving behind the haunting memories of their ordeal. Their new home was modest but filled with warmth, a symbol of their fresh start. Sarah and Emily attended counseling, finding strength in shared healing. Peter poured himself into rebuilding his contracting business, determined to protect his family at all costs. Jake's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. Joining a soccer team brought a spark of joy to his life, and the camaraderie helped him rebuild his confidence. The once frightened boy had grown into a resilient young spirit, proof of the strength they had all gained. One sunny morning, Ryan Carter drove through the Harper's new neighborhood during his patrol. On the porch, Jake waved enthusiastically, his once swollen, "I now a distant memory." Ryan waved back, a quiet sense of pride settling over him. The radio crackled, pulling him back into the rhythm of his work, but as he drove away, he couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. Jake's waving figure faded into the distance, a symbol of hope and the impact of doing the right thing. The victories weren't in medals or recognition, Ryan thought, but in the simple, unspoken connections that proved lives could be changed for the better. And so, the Harper family found a new beginning, proving that resilience and hope can shine even in the darkest times. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales that touch the heart.